Hey guys, Dylan Counts here, producer of the Ecommerce Alley podcast. Last week's episode was amazing. It was over an hour and a half of content, which we thought was just too much to pack into one episode, so we split it up. Here's what happened last week.
So I'm a traffic-centric type ad manager. Most agencies tend to be more creative-centric. I've come to believe that the simpler that you set things up, the easier it is for Facebook to kind of optimize. If you ask Facebook to spend about $1 an hour, it takes its sweet time to look for the best people it can for you. If you ask it to spend $4 an hour, $5 or $6, you're forcing it to go much wider into the audience and go to less qualified people. It's called pacing. The official term is pacing, right? So Facebook paces your spend to try to balance how much you're spending with finding the best possible people it can based on how much you're spending. So if you put up 20 campaigns, $20, $25 campaigns, and let's say 7 of them or 8 of them end up getting sales within the first couple of days, and then of those 7 or 8, 5 or 6 of them continue to get results. The first couple of days, the total ad spend for the 20 campaign batch might be a loss. But you start getting into more and more days of those winners making you profit, and they're going to very quickly more than make up for the loss that you had for the entire initial 20 campaign batch. And once you hit profit for that batch that you put up, now it just continues to be profit until they, their life cycle kind of dies off and you get to pause them again. Crazy, huh? It seems so simple. It just starts building up. And then lookalikes. You want to hear my strategy on lookalikes? No one uses this strategy.
We're going to talk about it, Dave. So one thing, as you're kind of talking, that I'm just thinking here is, I asked a very like a simple question. Obviously, everyone's like, oh, well, if you're spending $5K and the method works, why don't you just spend $10K a day? Or why don't you just go up from there? And I think one thing that what I've learned is I view scaling any business and whether it's ads or it's something else, scaling any business it's not linear, right? You do have the law of diminishing returns, but then also I kind of like to think of scaling as like you're climbing a mountain. Like you don't just start at the bottom of the mountain and you look up at the peak and you're like, all right, and you just walk straight up to the peak, right? It's like you're gonna go up, you're gonna take a wrong turn, you're gonna backtrack, you're gonna have switchbacks. It's like you're climbing, and like you were just saying, you're finding all these pieces that start to stack on top of it. You have these audiences, then you have these creatives and these pieces of copy you're using, and so you're just like stacking things, but it's not just like, oh, this works. I'm at $200 a day. Why don't I just go spend $20,000 a day? Things don't in a linear way just go straight up.
If only they did.
If only, I know.
I look at it like stability, reach, right? So like, let's say you're spending $200 a day and then it's going well. So now you try adding 100. Now, either it works right away, or it might take you a couple of days, a few days, a week to literally figure out of the additional budget stuff that works. Once you feel that 300 is stable, you can maybe go to 500. Now, maybe it works right away, or maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't work right away, it doesn't mean the game's over. It means you have to test, some new stuff or different stuff with that extra budget. Once you get that 500 feeling stable, right, you're getting good results for 2, 3, 4 days in a row, then maybe you can go to 750 or maybe even 1,000. Same concept. You keep working that 1,000 until you get the overall batch stable enough that you're getting results that make you at least minimally happy 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And then maybe you go to 1,500. But it's this process of you reach for the next level and then you work it until it's stable. Once it's stable, then you can reach. Now, if at any point your situation doesn't look good for 2, 3, 4 days, you might have to go back a level, right? So you're not always going forward. Like there's definitely a lot of situations where you take 3, 4, 5 steps forward, 1, 2, 3 back, 2, 3, 4, 5 forward, 1, 2 back. If you put up, this idea of these test batches, if you put up 1 or 2 good test batches in a row where things just work really well, the audience, new audiences are working, the new creatives working, well, that might get you to a stability position on this next level that you're testing much quicker. But if you put up a couple of batches that don't work, now you might have enough other stuff to help make sure it doesn't, you're not losing a ton of money. But if one of your test batches or two of your test batches don't work well, that would be a reason where you try to spend more money and your results weren't what they needed to be, but the game's not over. You just have to put up another one or two batches. And hopefully, you know what I mean? Like you keep iterating until you find batches that do work. And once you get the overall situation feeling stable, then you can try to add another 4, 8, 12 campaigns. Wait until the overall situation is stable. Add another, 2 or 3, 4 days in a row, things were below my target range. Well, let me not test as much. Let me look at the average over a shorter time period. A lot of times people have they'll look at this month, where if that's the first 5 or 6 days of the month, it's a short period. But if that's the 25th day of the month, that's a much longer time period. And if your results are looking good every day, then you can afford to be a little more flexible with that time range that you're using to evaluate results. But if results aren't doing what you want them to do, right? Like you look at your overall group of campaigns that's up, you look at this month, it's the 20th of the month, and everything looks good. Everything is looking great. But today sucks and tomorrow sucks. Well, why is that happening? But when you looked at the last 3 weeks of results or 4 weeks, everything looks good. But why is today not good? And the answer is because you're probably looking at too wide of a time period. If you looked at only the last 7 days, you might realize that half your campaigns haven't been working for 7 days. They're above the average you need them to be. Whereas the 30-day average, they look good. The 7-day average, they don't. And if today doesn't look good and tomorrow doesn't look good, you have to start figuring out why is that happening when my stats make it look like everything that's up is good. And people are like, oh, Facebook's just inconsistent. It's like, no, your time period of review is just too long. When you shorten that time period up, you'll start seeing things that have started dying in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 days that need to be paused and replaced.
And that's a good way to spot an agency that's BSing you. When they look at that and then all of a sudden it's too late and everything has gone to crap and they're like, well, but in the last 30 days it was this. And you're like, yeah, but in the last 7 days it was half of that. It's because, and from a lot of experiences that I've seen, is they don't look enough. They're not agile. They're not looking at everything. Crazy. I'm going to tell a quick story about that. So beginning of September, or end of August, beginning of September, we saw a really steep decline in a brand that we were working with, like steep decline in the revenue start just tanking. And Facebook ad spend, we manage Facebook ads. So Facebook ad spend was going up and our ROAS was above the target. Like target is 3.5 for this brand. And we were above the target. We're using high ROAS to have accuracy. So we know we're above it. But their AOV, just side note, their AOV is like 180. So it's, they have a little bit higher margin in there. So 3.5, we're above and ads are going up. Well, we meet with the client and they're like, everything's tanking. We don't know what's going on. Pull back the ad spend. And I'm like, no, we can't pull back. Like, look, Facebook is doing great. And then I looked at...
You'd be doing worse if we're not spending.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the story. So this is the beginning of September. We meet like September 5th or something like that. And 2 weeks earlier, I had sent an email and I was like, hey, listen, I'm not a Google guy. We did Google for 2 years. Side note, we don't do it anymore because we need to specialize. So I know enough about Google to be dangerous. And I was like, I emailed 2 weeks prior and I said, hey, have a look at Google. The spend was at like $1,500 a day. And now it's at like $800 a day. And the spend is going down. Just have a look at it. And they're like, okay. And they sent it over and nothing came of it. Well, then we ended up meeting mid-September after they told us to pull budget. I said, no, if we pull budget, it hurt us even worse. And it did. It hurt so bad. We had to call this emergency meeting. I went through everything. I was like, give me access to Google and logged in there. And dude, and I'm not going to drop names of who is managing, but all I will say is I logged in. And in Google, just like in Facebook, you can look at historical changes to all campaigns in the account. And dude, I went and looked. And between like this new agency, we've been with them for a while, this brand, but this agency took over end of May, beginning of June. And I looked in June, they did all these changes in the Google account. They took a winning account. They just took it over, right? And that's easy to take a winning, someone that's winning and make yourself look good. It's really easy. You just take it over and then they just let it sit. And there were 2 days of edits that they made. They adjusted a couple budgets. You can see the timestamp. So I'm like, dude, there's less than 2 hours spent on this whole account in July. August, this was touched like twice, and the budget started tanking. Like the results, the budget stopped spending end of July, beginning of August, and the budget kept going down. So here's what happened was you had someone who wasn't paying attention. Like they weren't paying attention to what was working and what wasn't working. They were just looking at the last 30 days and they were riding the wave. And then by not paying attention, then you get to September, it is too late. You're like, dude, we just spent a whole month of this budget getting like not spending for 4.5 weeks, and it destroyed the results, man. It was a train wreck. And I kind of saw it halfway through, but I didn't know. And then I saw it once we looked at the results of everything. And I just tell that story because like Dave, there's no way you could go 4 weeks, or like some people think they could just ride the train. It's like you might have. You could have, like, for example, right now, Dave, in the last 2 weeks, you guys ran a promo. If you looked at the last 30, dude, your numbers are going to crush it. So you could just take the next 2 weeks off, right? And it's going to still look good. But then in 2 weeks, suddenly the previous 2 weeks are going to look like crap, right? When you don't let it go. And
I won't have enough workhorses that are left to support a bigger budget.
Yeah.
Right. Because too many will have died off that I didn't notice bringing down my results that need to be replaced. And all of a sudden, my nice solid foundation starts getting real shaky because there's all these different things that aren't doing well that I'm not pruning. It's like not pruning. It's like you're constantly pruning your trees. And if they get too crazy, that's when results start getting bad. So yeah, it's definitely not a set it and forget it approach by any stretch of the imagination. And if you were managing 20 accounts, I can't see doing it. You know what I mean? It's just too much work. There's not enough time in the day. But if your goal is 2, 3, 4, 5 accounts that you're maximizing, or for anyone listening, if they're working on their own stuff, so it's only one account, and their livelihood is based on this business, then they're probably willing to spend a little bit more time in order to get a little bit better result, if not a lot better result, by putting more time and effort into it, as long as they know what to put their time and effort into. The problem is that if you don't know what to put your time and effort into, you could be willing to work your ass off and not get good results because you don't know where to spend your time or how to spend, what to spend your time doing.
Yeah.
But I have a nice clean strategy.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk audiences a little bit because like you mentioned, you basically, you do single interest. It sounds like you do some lookalikes in there. You do individual audiences within each campaign and ad set.
I have a very specialized way of doing lookalikes that no one's ever done. You ready for another groundbreaking technology or another kind of groundbreaking approach that you probably never heard of? If you have, I'll give you $100 out of my pocket if you've heard of this. Because maybe you have, maybe I'm not as crazy as I think I am. I test all 10% of the audience. I test at the same time. The 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, the 8, the 9, the 10. I don't exclude anything from anything else. So Facebook, if you were doing this, they would say, well, you should exclude the previous percentage. So you're only going to unique audiences, right? You're getting unique chunks. I tested doing that versus no exclusions over a bunch of pairs, right? So the same everything except for in this group of 10, I'm excluding the previous percentage, and in this group of 10, I'm just 1% to 2%. Even though each percent includes all the percentages underneath, I'm just incrementing it. And every time I've done that, the not excluding the previous percentages does so. Yeah, not excluding previous percentages does better than excluding them. And my conclusion is that what you don't want to do, like part of marketing and part of advertising, is people need to see stuff 3, 4, 5, 10 plus times before they take action. Right? So if you have the group of people that are perfect for you, are qualified or congruent, just because they see it, your advertisement 1 or 2 times doesn't mean, even though they're perfect, doesn't mean they're going to take action. You want those people to see your ads as much as possible, within reason. And Facebook has account-based frequency restrictions, so you can never shoot yourself in the foot by accident, right? Even if the same person is in 50 campaigns, that account will only go to that person with ads. And it's 3 different levels. One level is if they've never seen or engaged with your fan page, maybe they can only see your ad 3 or 4 times. If they've engaged with your fan page but aren't a fan, it's like maybe 6 or 7. And if they're a fan of your fan page, then it's maybe like 10 times, right? So how many times the account can show a person an ad is based on their engagement level with the fan page that you're using for advertising. But no matter what you can't do is inundate somebody with your ads 50 times a day. Facebook prevents that.
Really?
So that
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's the reason I don't worry about this crossover crap, because I know at the high level I can't shoot myself in the foot, and I also know I want to hit my best people as many times as I can within reason.
Mm-hmm.
So if the 4% audience happens to pull somebody that's part of the 1% group, well, great. I got that perfect person another time because I didn't exclude them from that 4%.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hit my best people as many times as I possibly can. And in fact, campaigns have history from a frequency perspective. Mm-hmm. So once they've gone to the best people so many times, each campaign is going to naturally stop going to those best people because it's already gone to them too many times. So sometimes you can just take a campaign that stopped working, pause it, duplicate it, turn it back on, the new version, and it starts working like it was before it started dying because you reset that history and you hadn't finished with those best people yet. They just needed to see your stuff more times. So that's why sometimes you can literally just put a new version up of something that was working, stop working. And instead of having to come up with a whole new thing to put up that's going to work, you just put the same thing up again. And like magic, maybe 7 out of 10 times you do that, it picks up where it left off before it started dying off. But I think that's the reason why that happens is from a historic frequency perspective. It's going to stop going to those top qualified people after a certain amount of time. And that's why if you reset that history, it starts going back to those people again.
It's funny because I had no idea. I didn't know that Facebook says that or anything. All what's interesting is I have told people, I don't have anything to back it, but all I say is the audience overlap that the moment you get on with a Meta quote pro, like tons of quotes around the pro word. When you get on with a Meta pro, they're going to say, we don't want audience overlap or fragmentation. We're going to want to make sure we take all your audiences and stack them in together. And anytime someone says, it's telling me that I'm going to have audience overlap, I tell them, ignore it. I have never experienced visually seen or experienced
those yellow triangles with the little exclamation mark for warnings that try to say what you're doing wrong. Like if I listened to that, I'd be fired from every client I have.
Yeah, it's so true.
Confident in that.
So true. Well, and so I didn't know that they'll cap frequencies. I just tell people I've never seen it, so I don't listen to it.
Facebook agency conference. That's one of those little tidbits I pulled out of that conference that I remember to this day, a couple years later.
Really? Wow. That's actually, I'm glad you said that. I'm going to start telling people.
Do you know the difference between the Google algorithm and the Facebook algorithm, like the auction, the Google auction and the Facebook auction?
No idea.
The Google auction works like a painting auction. You bid 100, I bid 200, you bid 300. I say that's too much. You pay 300. Facebook, and there's a scientific name for it, but as a different type of auction. It's a theoretical auction. You bid 100, I bid 200. You bid 300. I say too much. You win. You paid the $147 that Facebook predetermined the painting was worth. The auction was theoretical. The actual price of the inventory was already decided. On Google, a big company can take over a niche by outspending and outbidding everyone else. They'll pay more, but they can take all the traffic or a lot of it, that concept. Mm-hmm. On Facebook, because the inventory, the cost of inventory is predetermined, no one can affect the cost. You can sort of affect your volume if you muck around with the bid, which I recommend never doing unless there's a very good specific reason for doing it. 98% of the time, you're just going to get worse results. But yeah, it's an idea that most people don't get.
So,
is that
so are you running automated bidding?
I do no. Let Facebook max volume at best cost.
Okay.
I tested. I just the only time it sometimes can help is if you're not getting volume.
Okay.
If you set your campaign, let's say you're not using my strategy, you put $100 up and it's only spending $35 of that $100. You can get more volume by manually putting a higher bid in there, therefore winning your theoretical auctions more often to get you that volume. But you're not actually going to pay more. It's a weird concept that that was something there was a whole hour session about that during that agency conference where one of the developers talked about the difference between the Google auction and the Facebook auction and how the cost of inventory is predetermined. And that's also the reason that two agencies don't screw each other on Facebook. On Google, if you had two agencies working for the same company, you'd be competing with each other. You'd be costing each other more money. But on Facebook, because the cost of inventory is predetermined, you could have 5 agencies and you're still not going to accidentally start bolstering your cost. You might squeeze out the market because you're spending too much, across the entire market between 5 agencies, but you're not going to artificially inflate your own costs. So with Facebook, you can have multiple agencies and not compete. With Google, multiple agencies absolutely would compete each other and cost each other more money.
With so many campaigns that you're running and managing all this, like I just kind of think if I'm someone listening and I'm just spending $100 a day or $200 or $500 or $50,
$4 to $8, $25 campaigns.
So that's what I love. I think that's one thing I love about your methodology, Dave, is like if you're just getting going, this works. Or if you're spending legitimately $5,000 a day, this works. And you said something earlier, I took a note on this. Stabilize, reach. You stabilize and then you reach for the next one. And sometimes you take these 3 to 5 steps forward and then you take 2 to 3 steps back. In that, but the biggest thing is it's progress. And that's what I just love about your approach. I teach Facebook ads. We have a Max Profits Mentorship coaching program. We just passed 100 people in our group and in our program that go through this, and we teach Facebook ads, and it is scientific. The methodology is different than yours, but even when I'm teaching it, I'm always trying to be open-minded. Like, I need to try different things. Like, the game isn't like, this is the way the game is played, and it's going to be played like this till the end of time. It's like, things change, and you have to be open to new ideas, and I love what you've done.
For a long time, I was a $25 campaign Nazi. Right? Unwilling to even entertain the idea of anything other than a $25 campaign. And then I ended up working with this business for a time period. They were doing lead generation, right, for like solar power types of like businesses. And they were spending $20 to $25,000+ a day consistently for over like 2 years, consistently. And they were doing it with this idea of starting the day with more campaigns than they planned to finish the day with. And the ones that worked quickly, they would scale. And the ones that didn't work quickly, they would pause. They had very strict rules in place. And if they started with 100 campaigns at $100 each, they might only finish the day with 3 to 8 of them that had scaled up to 1,000, 1,500. And of those, maybe 2 or 3 of them the next day would actually spend 1,000, 1,500 again. Well, some of them would get paused within the first $20 because they didn't get their first sale. But it was this whole entire rules-based in-day scaling approach. And I couldn't argue with the fact that they were spending $20, $25,000+ a day profitably. And I was like, what the? And that was like, and then I kind of try to pull that same approach to this e-commerce business that we work together with. And that was the first time I ever hit 25,000 in a single day. The problem with that approach in this situation was after 3 or 4 days, the rules that were in place no longer, like, so much got paused so quickly. I went from spending 25,000 to 16,000 to 8,000 to like 3,000. And I knew I could be spending more than that. But the approach I was using, right, this rules-based approach, it didn't last past the very best conversion period. That's when I learned that I can only use that approach during the very best conversion periods, but I can use it to spend 25 plus thousand. But I have to be very careful, because if I only use that approach, then all of a sudden I'm only going to spending 3,000 when I could be spending 15 to 18,000, right? Maybe not the same 25 or 30, but I shouldn't have dropped. So like I can spend at least 15,000 and get good results, but this approach didn't allow for it. So the approach helped me kind of believe and understand that I could actually muck around with the budgets in very specific situations, to the point where I spent $50,000 just in the last couple of weeks doing it. But at the same time, I also had a $10,000 to $15,000, depending on the time period, batch of $25 campaigns. And those $25 campaigns were averaging about 30% better results than the scaled campaigns, 40%, 30%.
Wow.
So that 10 to 15,000 of budget was helping make sure that the other 20 to 30,000 was kind of hitting that minimum, kind of target. Because I don't think I could have spent that. I couldn't have spent the entire 30,000 or 50,000 just using scaled campaigns, or my ROI would have been too low. I needed that group of $25 campaigns to kind of pull the average up. But because I had that group pulling the average up, it allowed me to spend more than double on scaled campaigns. And that's how I was able to spend, so much, was a combination. And then after the first few days, it went from 70% of my budget was going towards these scaled campaigns to about 45 to 50%, became much more 50-50. So after those really great days, all of a sudden it was more of an even balance. But it wasn't like I could have spent, I was already at 600 campaigns. I only have 1,000 to work with in the account. There's a limit. There's a limit to the amount of campaigns you can or ads you can have in an account.
I did not know, because I've never hit it.
We hit it a couple of promotions ago when I wasn't using scaled campaigns. I was only using 25, and I'd gotten to like almost the $20,000 range. But it's per fan page, not per account. So the combination of the other agency plus mine, we hit our 1,000 limit. And if I try to create any more, it said, sorry, you've hit your limit. And then, but that was only for the first couple of days. Once conversions died, I wasn't able to keep that level of spend up. So, I very quickly went down below and was an issue. But yeah, so no matter what, until you spend $1 million a month, at $1 million a month, it goes from 1,000 to I think 10,000 or maybe 5,000 ads. But from 100,000 to $1 million, you get 1,000 ads in your account for your fan page, not your account, for your fan page that you're allowed to use that are active. So that $25 kind of approach can only be used up to 15, 20,000 before you're going to hit your limit. And but I want, so I came to a compromise. But again, come full circle, for a period of time, I was like, anything other than $25 campaigns. I saw this business that was doing it. I couldn't close my eyes to it. I couldn't pretend like it wasn't happening. I couldn't argue with it. I couldn't say this won't work, because it was working.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw what they're doing. And then I tried to leverage it. And I realized that I had to modify the approach, which is a good example of recognizing something that works someplace. Maybe you can take it, but you might need to tweak it for it to work in your environment. Yeah. Right? Maybe you need to change the rules. That they were using these rules. Maybe you can use the same kind of approach, but you have to change the levels at which the rules kind of come into play. But that's when I first became open-minded to kind of using bigger budgets in very specific situations. But for the most part, I'm a $25 Nazi.
Yeah.
For almost everything.
So
and the other thing, you mentioned small budgets. Keep in mind, like this, where I'm at now with this client, I started off at $500 a day, which is $25 campaigns. And then over the last 3 or 4 years, I just kept building and building and building and building. And then eventually I kind of maxed out at 5,000. And then my goal has been kind of to maintain results at that level. Because I know the other agency can't do it. They're usually stuck at, 2 to 3 to 4,000 while I'm spending 5,000. But yeah, I mean, it started off in this situation with 2025, but I built situations to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a day where I started off with 825s or 425s. And then it's like once you get 2 or 3 working, maybe then you go to 8. And once you get 5 or 6 of those working, then you go to 16. And once you get, but it's just identifying campaigns that are working. And then once you have enough of them working that your overall average is where it needs to be, then you can add more of them into the mix.
Wow.
Just build and build and build and build.
Now, what I'll say with, and I'll probably end on a couple different stats I do want to share here with you, Dave. So we talked 6 weeks ago. You broke this down. And in the back of my mind, the whole time you're talking, I'm like, this dude's crazy. That's a lot of campaigns and that's a lot of $25. I'm just being real. And
although when you realize how many ad sets you have, you realize that if all you did was take your ad sets and create a campaign per ad set, it's actually not as many as you think.
Yeah, it's a similar it's similar structure with the similar concept, but each campaign, like you said, carries its own successes or failures. And so what I did, we did this for us and we saw some great results. I forget what our ROAS was at the end of it. We had an event that we were running, and I don't know, we ran maybe like 5 or 10K in like a 2-week period of time, like testing this. Well, the ROAS probably ended at like 4 or 5 for us, but we have some higher ticket stuff that really kind of like, brings it up. So then we went and we tested this on 2 different funnels for a Facebook ad client of ours. And I have our Hyros up here. So if anyone's listening, they don't know what Hyros is. Hyros is an attribution software that helps kind of combat iOS 14. It gives you like really good accuracy on your tracking. And so I have Hyros up here. And so what we did, we launched multiple, and I'm just going to give you a couple things here, Dave, just because like we took this concept and we did this. And so we ran $25. We launched over like 20 ad sets between 2 different, we launched like, we launched like, I think 20 different, $20, $25. I'm like, my terminology is all over the place here. $20, $25. We didn't do the campaign strategy. We actually did it with an ad set. So I broke the rules. But even in the same philosophy here, I do want to give you some stats. So we took some of our audiences we've used before and we ran these with proven ad, and we'll take an audience and we did each audience 3 times. So like we took one audience on Fish Market or whatever, we just duplicated it 3 times over. So basically same identical audiences, right? So we call it
$75 per audience creative broken up into 3 $25 campaigns.
Yes, exactly. So basically $75 into a single audience. And so we did this, and then I also tested, you and I met and you were like, hey, I said, what are your thoughts on open targeting? Which if anyone's listening, open is just where you open this up like broad, United States, ages. We did 40 plus. And then we even did like excluding the West Coast, like pretty open targeting. So we just like tested it and we did 3 runs of each, because sometimes what we've learned is it'll latch into a good pocket of an audience or latch into a bad pocket of an audience. And so we tested that, and I'm going to read you off some stats here. So Fish Market was something we went after. That was one interest. This one did 9.3 ROAS. Then we had another one do, the second one did 3.31, and the third one did $0 in sales, and we shut it off. So if we just went with one and it landed on like the 0 one, we'd be like, oh, this audience kind of sucks here. It didn't work out. But we did the same thing, same exact audience, same exact ads, 9.3, 3. What was it again? It was 3.31 and then 0. And then here's another example. We did another one. One did 7.78, another did 5.19, one did 3.9, and we actually did 4 here. And the fourth one did 3.67. So the lowest was 3.67 and the highest was 7.78. And I could just tell you like,
what are you used to getting there, just for comparison?
Good question. So comparison, we're typically sitting in like the 3 to 3.5. Okay. So I'm looking right here, and out of these 10, 7 of them are above a 3.5. 7 of the 10. I have a 3.67, 3.9, 4.05, 4.0, and it just goes up to a 9.3. And so,
and you pause those 3, and you could put 3 more up, and potentially, you know what I mean, and fill those 3 out, or put up another 10 and look for another 7. Now you have 14 that are performing. Then you put up another 10, maybe you get another 6 or 7, and now you have. And for each batch, the ones that don't perform, the 6 or 7 that are performing will quickly make up for the loss in the 3 that didn't, as long as you pause those 3 quick enough and you don't hold hope that they're going to work out, and you don't let them keep like, oh, eventually Facebook's going to warm up. Like, no, once you pass a certain point, the likelihood of it performing drops. Doesn't mean it won't, but the likelihood of it does, which means you're now chasing a gut shot straight, right? You're chasing, your odds no longer are good. Right. When the flop came out, maybe it looked good, but now with the turn, it just, the odds stop once it hits for my e-commerce client. Once it hits its 3rd or 4th day, if it hasn't had its first sale, the likelihood it's going to get it's going to all of a sudden hit my target ROI just drops through the floor. But I've tested on what day did each campaign get its first sale. And I've gotten to the point where up till 4 days, I can create winners that will then end up continuing to perform at the level I need it to. But when I hit the 5th day, the amount of winners just dropped percentage wise again through the floor. So that's how I figured out that it was that 4th day. You know, if things are good overall, I can wait 4 days. If things are kind of iffy overall, I might only wait 3 days. But the way I learned that there are ones that will hit their first sale on the 3rd or 4th day, and then weeks later still be performing, is because when they hit their first sale, I changed the naming convention. So I knew this one got its sale on its first day. This one got its sale on the 2nd day. And then 3 weeks later, I looked at my naming convention and saw I still have, ones that hit their their first sale on their 3rd or 4th day. I still had those that were workhorses. They're still running and they're still performing. And that's how I kind of narrowed down for this situation the amount of days that I can wait and still get performing campaigns was by literally every night going in, seeing which ones got their first sale, and then changing the naming convention, and did that up until the 4th and 5th and 6th day. And then I realized the 5th and 6th day, stopped being worth it because I really didn't have any that were continuing to perform. But the first 4 days were all viable.
Man.
But in other situations, it might be 2 days, or, like each situation, you need to test what your own kind of criteria is. So I'm definitely not saying 4 days is the right amount. I'm just saying for this situation, the testing that I performed, that's what ended up spitting out of the testing.
Wow. Well, Dave, man, thanks for being on. You have such a unique way of testing. I love how left brain analytical, man, your mind is. But one note, we're at a 7.6 ROAS as of right now today with some of these campaigns. That's across the.
What'll be interesting is like in 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now, you should update everybody how many of those are still performing.
I love it, man.
Right? And then look back at the total spend on the entire batch and see what your ROI is.
I love it.
And that's how you can get a feel for whether or not this is actually better than what you're used to, is start looking at data like that.
Well, I'll keep you informed. I know we're working together, man, so I'm sure we'll have many more conversations. Everyone listening, hey, you've been listening to the Ecommerce Alley podcast, hanging out here with Dave Bass and myself. We're grateful that you are listening. This has been produced by the legendary Dylan Counts behind the scenes. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.